5 million. So relax now. It is, in fact, as everyone here has studied physics, even as little as I have, in cosmological time, very, very soon. I mean, we can already see Andromeda with the naked eye. It's beginning to fill our night sky. We're a lot nearer to this than we are to the Big Bang, about which people speak so confidently as God's presumable work. So get real about that, I would. There is no, if you assume evolution by natural selection, no act of faith is required. Because everything works on that assumption. You can, if you're faced with a new virus, sequence its DNA, show its kinship with your good self, work out how to defeat it, work out perhaps how to preempt the next. Predictions can be made. This is not just a theory, as some people are fond of saying. It's a bit better than that. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with being a theory. It's a theory which survives tests. Whether applied to discoveries in the remote paleontological past, or the present biological moment, or the fairly predictable biological and immunological future. We can rely on it. It's not a matter of faith at all. It's what happened. It's in the molecular biological record, and it's in the fossil record. There is no question but that evolution by natural selection did occur. There is some question about how, and these gaps are being filled in. Whenever new evidence is discovered, it is found to be congruent with, compatible with, the existing knowledge in the field. No one is entitled any longer, and in fact the effort's almost been given up, to assume that the gaps produce a mystery which can only be filled by an explanation from the supernatural. That's now considered to be too lame for most public consumption, unless you go to the Ohio Museum with the animatronic children and dinosaurs.
By the way, who considers...
Which I recommend, by the way, that you do.
Who does consider it that lame, Christopher?
What?
You said it's considered that lame.
It's considered pretty lame
but
to...
Who considers
it's considered pretty lame, I find. I can't... Our comrade of this evening, for example, hasn't taken the opportunity to plead that case. I find it's increasingly rare among creationists to find that those who subscribe to it will argue the God of the gaps as confidently as they once used to.
But when
it hasn't happened tonight.
But you said it's considered. I mean,
well, I'm saying, I'll rephrase if you like. It appears to be uttered with considerably less confidence and frequency than it did. I notice the Reverend Cromarty is even nodding there.
Change. Jay?
Yes, again, I hope someone is taking count of the subjects that are being discussed and the number of insults that are being hurled from one or the other podium tonight. But I fully agree. I don't think the arguments... I don't think the argument before us tonight about theism or atheism ought to be based on the things that we don't know. I think it ought to be based on the things we do know. And I think we do know with a fair degree of certainty that the universe is not eternal, but it came into existence in the finite past, so that it forces upon us a fundamental question that deals with one of the first principles of logic. The universe had a beginning. We know something doesn't come from nothing. Everything that has a beginning has a cause for its existence. The universe had a beginning, so it must have had a cause for its existence. It can't have caused itself to come into existence. This is a strongly theistic piece of evidence drawn from the best science of the day. And we seem to be talking about Mormonism, we seem to be talking about the various crimes of various religions, but we seem not to be talking about the public evidence on which I think the case for theism needs to be made in the 21st century. And so I hope you're taking account of that. I hope you remember the basis on which the evidence is being made.
Wait a second. Wait. It's not...
Right, I can...
You have to write down the questions if you want them answered.
Right. I can say, we discussed the infinite regress question earlier. The claim is not, again, that everything has a cause for its existence. If the universe were eternal, if we had some reason to think the universe is eternal, then the universe itself wouldn't require the question. But we have empirical reason to think the universe began to exist. Every view of the universe, of reality, is going to have a fundamental resting point of explanation. So the question is, what's the fundamental reality that has always existed? We know the universe is now a crummy candidate for that explanation because it began to exist. God did not begin to exist, nor do we have any reason to think so. So in the competition between the two hypotheses, we know the universe began to exist. That's why I think in that particular piece of evidence, theism wins the day over materialism.
Here's
It's
a
not
question.
not even casuistry. You just said something can't come into existence uncaused unless it's God.
No,
Well,
God
that's
did
not
not
even
come
trying to have it
into
both ways.
existence. God did not come into existence. The argument is that everything
A
that
priori.
begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. That's the argument.
With the
It's not
exception of
everything
your,
has
with the
cause.
exception of your a priori
No, the universe
presumption.
itself. No, not at all. The universe itself might not have had a beginning. It might have existed from eternity. We know that's not true about the universe, so it calls for a cause.
Here's a question from Tracy in Ontario, Canada. I think this town is called Staines or Stainer in Ontario, Canada. At one point there was organic matter, or inorganic matter, and then there was organic matter. How did organic matter originate? We'll start with, since we usually start with Christopher, we'll start with you this time, Jay.
Yeah, there's this fundamental question. Everyone recognizes it. It's not as if the atheists or the theists recognize this as a problem. There's some fundamentally or qualitatively different reality that we see in the origination of life. Life differs in some fundamental way from the things we see in mere physics or mere chemistry. There's of course, a debate. There's a huge debate simply about the definition of life. The fundamental reality that I would say is different in life that you don't have in mere physics or chemistry is information. And information, I would argue, is a fundamentally different type of reality from mere matter or chemistry. Think of it this way. Think of text that's written on a page, right? Physics and chemistry can explain the properties of the ink, the properties of the paper, can describe why the ink is a good medium for holding some kind of information. But the information on a page, the message, is different. It's grounded in the medium, right? But you can't explain the information itself in terms of physics and chemistry. In the same way, you can't explain the coding regions in DNA in terms of bonding affinities or physical laws or basic physical or chemical laws. There's a fundamentally different type of reality. So that when we're asking the question of the origin of life, we're asking the question of the origin of biological information. This is very important because information theorists such as Henry Quasler point out that we habitually and quite rightly associate the origin of information with the activity of intelligent agency. So that when we find an origination of information someplace where it was not before, I think it calls for or suggests intelligent agency. Again, not of the existence of God. This is evidence for design that conduces toward theism, but I think it certainly points in that direction rather than atheism.
Christopher?
But the more we know, the more it replaces the question. I mean, there were forms of quasi-life, so pre-bacterial, pre-microbial, went off an extraordinarily long period of time. They don't appear to have been exactly conscious, but nor precisely inert either. Microscopically evolved into later forms. It goes on in this pointless, rather horrible, rather boring way for a very, very, very long time. The point is, what designer wants to make it come out like that? Meanwhile, as life gradually takes hold, 98% of its forms are obliterated without pity. If it wasn't for us knowing about them, they would never have existed. They only exist because we know about them. They didn't otherwise ever exist at all. And if we go, which we might, they won't have existed any more than we did. Now, who wants to make it come about like that? Take the project of eternal life, which I'm glad to find is nothing to do with any other concept of eternity that we could possibly give a name to. It's God's target, apparently, that we all attain this. Because I'm now talking to someone who has openly said that they are a believing Christian. Well, now, I've often wanted to know, if that's what he wants us to have, why do we have to go through this horrible interlude where the odds are stacked against us? What's the point of what used to be about 20 years of miserable life where it's almost impossible to avoid committing a mortal sin, to now, thanks to mainly to our efforts, okay, you've got 80 years where the odds are stacked against you. You're born sick, you're created ill in a hostile environment and commanded to be well. And if you can pass certain tests with the odds stacked against you, then you'll get eternal life. What is this? What designer does this kind of thing? Wants it, thinks it's fun to behave this way, thinks there's any justice or point in any of that? What is this really? But here's another insult for you. But the rantings of frightened children trying to make sense of things they don't understand, and terrified of a dictator who they're willing to appease and propitiate by everything from human